Good morning, this is Mark from CQ Simple. Today I'd like to walk you through the connection of a Grandstream gateway to the Nimbus platform. The Grandstream FXO gateway, in this case, will be utilizing the GXW4104 4-port FXO gateway. Is utilized when the customer would like to continue to use POTS lines on the Nimbus platform. I'd like to talk to you about how to set that up, both in the gateway itself and in the Nimbus today. So for the first thing you're going to want to do is take that Grandstream gateway, power it up. You'll have to see a power cord and an on-off switch in the back, powered up. At that point, connect the gateway to your network switch and be sure to use the WAN port. The WAN port on the gateway to your switch. At that point, it's going to obtain an IP address just like you would plug in a phone in, and at that point you just need to figure out what that IP address is, because you will need to go to that address to do your programming. Endpoint Manager can help you find it. That's the easiest. If you don't have Endpoint Manager, then you can just take a look at your router, look at devices connected, and then based on a MAC address, which is on the bottom of the gateway, you can match it up and figure out what the IP address of that gateway is. Once you know that IP address, take note of it, either write it down or copy it, and then navigate to that IP address from your web browser of choice, and there we will begin our initial programming. So the biggest thing, I think, a lot of people use the LAN port, but in this case for the programming you use the WAN port to connect it to your switch, and then once it's programmed you just continue to use that WAN port, so you don't need to change that later on. So let me take you to, this happens to be our demo system. The gateway is plugged in and is grabbing an IP address, so to find it, navigate to Endpoint Manager. In this case, we already have a Grandstream template made. If you have not yet made a Grandstream template, in order for the Nimbus to find that gateway, you need to have a template. So if you don't have one, select Add Brand, choose Grandstream. In this case, it's not an option for me because I've already done it. In this case, if you haven't done it, it will show up here. Select it. In this case, once you select it, make a template and save it. And you're going to come back here, and then you will have Grandstream being a possible brand for you to utilize here. You don't really need to do anything specific in the template. You just need to allow Grandstream to be an option. Then you'll look down here to Network Scan. And the network scan is going to go out there and search for all the devices with templates that have not yet been programmed. So you can see we've got two Grandstream devices here that have not yet been programmed. Now the question is, which one is the gateway? One of them is a phone, one of them is a gateway. The key is to look at your MAC address. On the bottom of the Grandstream device, you will find a MAC address, and in this case, when we look at the bottom of that device, it is that. So we know that our Grandstream gateway has been given an IP address of 10.1.10.171. So I'm going to go ahead and copy that, open up a new browser window, paste it, and there's our gateway. As you can see, it is the GXW4104. In this case, it is the 4-port 4104 gateway for POTS lines. The password is admin, A-D-M-I-N, no capitalization. And this will take you into the interface of that gateway. So let me walk you through how you're going to set this up. And certainly, pause and play as you kind of go through programming your own gateway. First thing you want to go to, and I'm just going to go through how I connect this to a Nimbus platform. I'm not saying this is the only way, but this is the way I prefer to. Under Networks, I want to click on Basic Settings. It's already selected. So as you can see, we are set up for dynamically assign an address, and that's not going to be the case once you have it on your network. We're going to want to statically assign that. Now in this case, you're going to want to change that address to match your scheme. So let's just say our scheme is 10.1.10, and we want to leave it at 12. That's the static IP that this device is going to be given, and you do need to give it a static IP. One thing to make note of is be sure that whatever IP you give it is outside of this DHCP scope of your router. So if your router is giving it addresses away between 50 and 200, you'd want to be somewhere either below or above that. So in this case we chose 12. You choose a subnet mask for your network. In this case you'd want to put in the router. So here the router is 10.1.10.1. The DNS server, you can put these in 10.1.10. So we'll use the routers for the first DNS server, and then if you wanted to use a different DNS server, say Google's, you can do that here. This device is not going to be using DNS servers too often, so it's not going to be a huge deal. So if we click Save, 10.1.10.12, so these configuration changes are not going to take effect until we reboot it. So if we want to reboot it, we can do it right now. So now the device is rebooting. I didn't necessarily have to do that, but it's just going to change the IP of this device. And then obviously it's still not going to be at 10.1.10.171 because we changed it to 10.1.10.12. So we'll wait for it to reboot. You can actually visually see on the gateway the device kind of go through the reboot phase. It does not take that long, anywhere maybe 30 seconds. So we're going to come up here. Oops, not 126. So there it is, 10.1.10.12. So that's an important first step, is to give this the right IP address. And it needs to be outside of your DHCP scope. At that point, we need to take a look at time zones. So under networks, I'm going to select date and time. So right now we're under Eastern time zone. Certainly you can change that if you're not in the Eastern time zone. At that point, press save, and you don't need to reboot it. Every time you press save, it's going to tell you, these changes are not going to take effect until you reboot. I typically don't reboot it. I reboot it after the IP, and then I wait. At that point, you have a choice. So under maintenance, we're going to select upgrade and provisioning. It can be provisioned to get upgrades for firmware from Grandstream. This is fine. Keep this as it is. At this case, it's up to you whether you want to have automatic upgrades. Default is no. If you do want it to look for new firmware, you can select yes. That's always a dealer preference there. Some dealers like to be in charge of firmware upgrades. They don't like surprises. Some dealers like to let Grandstream do their thing. But that is where you would make that change and then save it. In this case, we're not making any changes, or else I would save it. Next, navigate to FXO lines, and then dialing. Let me walk you through some of the changes you need to make to work this on the Nimbus platform. The first thing, for stage method, you need to change the 2 to a 1. Okay? We're going to be using one stage dialing here. Scroll down. And now we're looking at port scheduling. Right, this is the round robin here. You've got a couple different options here. You can either have each POTS line be its own trunk, or you can have all of the POTS lines be considered one trunk. In this example, I'm going to be setting up all the POTS lines to be one trunk. So I'm going to leave this as round robin 1 through 4, meaning that when people call out, it's just going to grab one of those POTS lines to call out on. It doesn't necessarily have to choose a specific one. So I'm not going to make a change there. Then I'm going to scroll down to dial plan. I should make a change here because you want to allow users to be able to take advantage of perhaps feature codes, if you want to allow them to do star feature codes for outgoing phone calls. So the change you're going to make here is you're going to add a bracket, X, star, close bracket, bracket, X, star, close bracket. I'm going to come down here and hit save. As usual, it's going to give us the option to reboot it. No need to reboot it right now. going to click on Settings. Then I'm going to click on Channel Settings. In this case, we do need to change our DTMF method from a 1 to a 2. Okay. Next, we're going to look down here. This is our unconditional call forwarding. This is in a very important section. These are the phone numbers that you're going to pass to the Nimbus. So the Nimbus has to recognize these phone numbers, and I'll show you how we're going to do that in just a second. These don't necessarily have to match the actual DIDs that people are going to be using to dial in, but it's helpful if they do. It's completely up to you. So let's just say you've got 4 telephone lines. Imagine those as channels. So you're going to have CH1, channel 1, colon, and then the phone number. So let's just say 616-822-4220. Then do a semicolon, then do channel 2, CH2, colon, and then what's the phone number for the second POTS line? 616-822-4221. Semicolon, CH3, your third POTS line, colon, 616-822-4222. Semicolon, channel 4, CH4, colon, 616-822-4223. So those are the phone numbers that are going to be passed to the Nimbus. Some people put the actual phone number in there. Some people shorten it to just the last 4 digits. So they would do 4220, 4221, 4222. I think we got one too many 2's in here. And 4223. In this case, I put the entire DID in there. We are going to be using port 5060, so leave this the same. One last thing for the fax line settings, we do need to change this to mode 2 if you're going to be bringing one of those lines in as a fax line, and then select save. Once again, you do not need to reboot it yet. Next, we're going to go to FXO lines, settings. These are things that you might change if your customer is complaining of audio. So these two right here, TX to PSTN and RX from PSTN, you can change the audio gain. As you can see, they're set at 1 and 0, and you've got -12 to 12 to change that in. If your customer is complaining of audio, you would change these based on their complaints. TX is the volume of the audio sent from the microphone to the ordinary phone line, and RX is the audio from the phone company to the speaker of your phone. And lastly, we're going to do caller ID, number of rings before pickup. I typically change this from 4 to 2. Then I hit save. Next, I'm going to go to accounts. I'm going to go to user account at the very bottom. So these are your 4 channels, and your 4 POTS lines going into the platform. So channel 1, channel 2, channel 3, channel 4. As I said earlier, I'm going to treat all of these channels as a single SIP trunk. So they're all going to be kind of interwoven together. So I'm actually going to use the same SIP ID for all of them. So GXW4104. And whatever you put in there is fine. That's completely up to you. It does not have to be GXW41. But that's just what I happen to type in here. I'm going to copy that. I'm going to have that be the same for all of them. I'm going to also have that be my authenticate ID. Right? So all of these POTS lines are going to be treated as a single SIP trunk. You're basically going to have 4 talk paths here. You then need a password. I would not recommend probably just using straight password. Maybe, whatever password you want to give this SIP trunk. It's completely up to you. Let's just say you go with CQ simple !1. It's not actually going to show it to you, but it's going to show the fact that you've typed in. You then would type that same password in for every single one here. CQ simple !! Or whatever password you choose. So I'm going to go through and type this in. I'm just going to use CQ Simple now for simplicity's sake. And then I'm going to save this. At this point, if you want to reboot it, you can. As always, you don't have to. Next, click on Accounts. Then click on General Settings. You're already there for Account 1. You want this to be an active account? Yes. Please give this a name. So Nimbus FXO Demo. That is optional. Whatever you want to put in there is fine. SIP server. This needs to be the local address of your Nimbus, the local IP of your Nimbus. So here it's 10.1.10.149. Outbound proxy, same thing, 10.1.10.149, or in your case, whatever your local IP of the Nimbus is, wherever your Nimbus is sitting. Save. Now go to Accounts. We were just there. In this case, instead of General Settings, we're going to click on SIP Settings. We do not want a SIP registration, so just change that to no, and save. In that case, we have set up the Grandstream gateway. Now we need to do some work in the Nimbus platform. So you've done half of the configuration so far. At this point, you would do a reboot. Now you've made all of your changes. So go to your Nimbus platform. First thing you want to do is make a trunk, basically a SIP trunk to go talk to that gateway. So under Connectivity, select Trunks. In this case, I just wanted to reinforce we are just sitting in the, our Nimbus here. This is our demo system. So under Connectivity, we're going to set up a SIP trunk to go talk to that gateway. Select Add Trunk, and you want to add just a typical SIP trunk. Trunk name is up to you. Does not play a role in the actual connection. So we can just say FXO. If you want to put caller ID in here, you can. At that point, click on SIP Settings tab. The trunk name in this case is important. This does need to match what you had put in previously. I'll show you exactly where it needs to match. So admin. So under accounts, user accounts, it needs to match this right here. GWXT1. So I'm just going to go ahead and copy it, and I'm going to paste it. Okay. So SIP user ID needs to be the same as your trunk name. At this point, type in the following. Type equals friend. Qualify equals yes. Secret equals, and this needs to match what you typed in right here for your authentication password. So if you typed in some fancy string of numbers and letters, you need to replicate that. Whatever it is, it should be the same here. In this case, I just use CQ Simple. You would prefer to use something a little more complicated than that. Host, this needs to be the IP of that gateway. So 10.1.10.12 is the IP of that gateway. Context equals from dash trunk. Since we're treating all of those POTS lines as a single trunk, we're going to type in insecure equals port. Next, we want to set up our DTMF mode. So DTMF mode equals RFC2833. Can reinvite equals no. At that point, that's all you need to set up for your SIP trunk. Hit submit. Apply the configs. So now we put it into effect that changes. The next step is you need to make inbound routes for those DIDs. So if we take a look back here under our FXO lines, we put in our DIDs here for all of the 616-822-4220, 616-822-4221, 616-822-4222. We also had 616-822-4223. So let's make sure we keep that in here. So those DIDs need to be in the system because that is the number that the gateway is going to pass to the Nimbus. So the Nimbus needs to be able to recognize that. So I'm going to copy. So I'm going to go under connectivity. I'm going to choose inbound routes. I'm going to add an inbound route now. So that number needs to be your DID number. Description can be whatever you want. You can either call it your main number or if you just want to copy it. Just as long as you have that is the same as the number that the Grandstream is going to be passing to you. And then you need to set a destination. Where do you want to send this? That's completely up to you and your customer. We'll just send it to an extension right now. You need to make a route, an inbound route, for each channel. So you can see we've got 4 channels here. We're going to need to make a route for that number. So now I'm going to add an inbound route. I won't do all 4, I'll just do 2. The DID number for this is 4221. 616-822-4221. Has to match exactly whatever you programmed here. The description is completely up to you. The destination is up to you. Maybe you wanted to go to a ring group, or a queue, or an IVR. And you would do that for the other 2 channels as well, changing the DID. So you'd have an inbound route for 4222 and 4223. Your last step is going to be to configure your outbound route, so that when someone inside the office dials, it correctly goes through that FXO gateway. So under connectivity, select outbound route, add outbound route. So we'll just do, let's call this the main outbound. You can add a DID if you like. You know, the main caller ID for your company. And then here's the important, or one of the 2 most important parts. You need to pick the right trunk sequence. So if you click on that, we're going to use our FXO trunk. That's what's going to connect us to our FXO. If you do not select a trunk here, no calls will work. If you have a failover SIP, you can add that as well. And if your POTS lines don't work, then try SIP. In this case, we're just going to use our FXO. And then click on dial patterns. Dial patterns just indicate what phone numbers do you want to allow people to dial. So in this case, you can use dial patterns wizard and decide, okay, they can dial 7 digits, 10 digits, 11 digits, and then select generate routes. So now it has the 911 numbers in here. They can dial 11 digits. They can dial 10 digits. If they dial 10 digits, prepend means add a 1 to it. Depends if you're SIP carrier or depends if you want to pass 10 or 11 digits. And then if they dial 7 digits, add a 1616, the area code. And then submit. At that point, you've connected your Nimbus to your gateway. You've connected your gateway to your Nimbus. You've made inbound routes. You've made outbound routes. And you should be ready for testing to actually call those numbers and see if everything is all set. One thing you can see here, to test to see if you have a connection between the gateway and your Nimbus, if you look under reports, select asterisk info. It's the very first option. Then come over here and select peers. This is going to show you your SIP trunks right here. GXW41. That's the IP address of your gateway, 10.1.10.12, and you look over to the far right, your status, okay. That means you're connected, 2 milliseconds, great connection time. Now you should be able to dial into your system, dial out of your system, and set up testing. I hope you found that helpful. If you have any questions, this entire setup is found in the back of our manual, the NimbusVoice version 13 manual, in case you need to see something more. If you have any questions, as always, don't hesitate to give us a call. Thank you, and have a great day.